All right, so get ready for a deep dive into the world of nuclear energy. And hold on tight because this story is wilder than any sci-fi movie. We're taking a look at a recent 10Q filing from NuScale Power Corporation. And let me tell you, this isn't just your typical financial document. It's practically a detective novel filled with twists and turns and a mystery we need to unravel.
What's so fascinating about this 10Q is that it gives us a glimpse into a company trying to pull off a high-wire act. They're attempting to revolutionize a traditionally slow-moving and heavily regulated industry like nuclear power.
So, for those of you who might not speak Wall Street fluently, let's break down what a 10Q filing is and why it even matters. It's like this. The SEC, which is kind of like the financial watchdog for publicly traded companies,
Right.
requires them to file these reports every quarter.
Right, it's like a financial health checkup. Instead of blood pressure and heart rate, we're talking about revenue, expenses, and profits.
Exactly. And in NuScale's case, this particular 10Q is raising eyebrows.
More than a celebrity gossip magazine.
Now, NuScale Power Corporation is not your average energy company. They're not drilling for oil or setting up wind farms. No, they're betting big on something called small modular reactors, or SMRs for short.
SMRs are designed to be like a more compact and adaptable version of those traditional nuclear reactors. So instead of those massive, imposing structures we picture with nuclear power plants, imagine a reactor shrunk down to the size of a school bus.
Whoa. Okay, that's small.
That's the idea behind SMRs.
And NuScale isn't just tinkering with a new type of reactor. They want to transform the entire nuclear energy industry.
Yeah, their pitch is that SMRs can solve a lot of the problems that have plagued traditional nuclear power for so long. They argue that SMRs are safer, more cost-effective, and faster to build.
And for those of you worried about climate change, SMRs have the potential to be a carbon-free source of energy.
Exactly.
And they're not just talking about one reactor here and there. NuScale wants to create a whole fleet of these SMRs, almost like Lego blocks of clean energy. So if you need more power, you just add another module, right?
Right. Precisely. This modular approach is a potential game changer. It could make nuclear power more accessible and appealing to all sorts of customers, from utilities to those in remote areas who are off the traditional grid.
Okay, that all sounds amazing, but hold on a second. Because here's where our detective story takes a bit of a dramatic turn. NuScale's first customer, the Carbon-Free Power Project, or CFPP, decided to back out of their contract. And it wasn't a mutual decision. This was supposed to be NuScale's flagship project, a 12-module plant in Idaho. But it all fell apart.
It's true, and the 10Q doesn't tell us everything about what went wrong, but it does show the financial damage. NuScale had to pay a whopping $49.8 million to CFPP, and on top of that, they're still on the hook for tens of millions of dollars worth of these specialized materials. You know, the long lead materials that take forever to make.
Ouch.
It's like they ordered a custom-made suit but suddenly realized they need a swimsuit instead.
Wow, that's gotta hurt. Especially for a company that's still trying to prove its technology can be profitable. I mean, if their first big project crashes and burns, what does that tell potential investors? Especially those who are already a bit hesitant about nuclear power.
It definitely raises a lot of questions. Was it just overly ambitious goals, or were there other issues going on behind the scenes? Maybe technical problems they don't want to talk about, or internal disagreements that led to this breakup.
This is like a financial thriller unfolding in real time. Okay, so let's grab our magnifying glasses and dive into those financial statements themselves. The 10Q doesn't sugarcoat anything. It shows that NuScale is in a tight spot right now.
Yeah, the loss of that CFPP contract has created a big hole in their revenue. There's a significant drop compared to last year, and their operating losses continue to grow.
But hold on, they laid off 28% of their employees. That's 154 people. That's a massive red flag. It makes you wonder about their confidence going forward.
It definitely seems like they're trying to batten down the hatches and weather the storm. You know, becoming more efficient is probably a smart move right now, but it's risky. You have to wonder if cutting so many people will affect their ability to innovate and stay ahead.
Right, that's a good point. They're also trying to raise money through an at-the-market program, or ATM for short. Can you explain what that is and why they're using this strategy?
Sure, an ATM program is kind of like having a garage sale. Except instead of getting rid of old stuff, they're selling shares of their stock directly on the market. It lets them raise money gradually without doing a big, fancy stock offering, which can be time-consuming and expensive. But there's a downside. If they sell too many shares, it can lower the value of the existing shares, and that would make their current investors unhappy.
So it's a gamble. You need to keep the lights on, but they don't want to alienate their investors. Now, what I find even more intriguing is this SEC inquiry. It's like a mysterious figure lurking in the shadows,
Right.
adding another layer to this saga.
Well, the SEC has asked for info about NuScale's employment, severance, and confidentiality agreements. We don't know everything yet, but this could be related to whistleblowers. And what's interesting is the timing. It makes you wonder if there were disagreements internally about ending the CFPP deal, maybe even pointing to management problems or tech setbacks they're trying to hide.
So we've got a company in financial trouble, a huge contract that went south, and the SEC is poking around. It's enough to make even a seasoned investor sweat a little.
It definitely raises concerns about NuScale's culture and how transparent they're being. Are they playing by the rules, or are they hiding something? We need to keep digging to find out.
This is getting interesting. But before we jump to conclusions, are there any positive signs for NuScale? Any glimmer of hope in this whole mess? Stick around for part 2, where we'll explore just that.
Welcome back, deep divers. NuScale's story sure is a roller coaster ride. But before we get too caught up in their problems, let's take a step back and look at the nuclear industry as a whole and see where these SMRs fit in.
Yeah, good point. There's a whole world of nuclear energy beyond NuScale's financial troubles. And honestly, it's an industry facing a bit of an identity crisis.
You hit the nail on the head. On one hand, they're being pushed to innovate, to shed this image of being a slow-moving giant. Bogged down by costs and safety concerns, think about those massive reactors. They take forever to build, cost a fortune. And let's face it, they still make people think of Chernobyl and Fukushima.
It's true. Those images are hard to shake, even though technology has come a long way. So how do you convince people that nuclear is the answer to a clean energy future when they're still scared of those disasters?
That's exactly what SMR companies like NuScale are trying to do. They're hoping these smaller, more flexible reactors can solve both the economic and safety issues that have held the industry back for decades.
So like the nuclear industry is getting a makeover, trading in those old, clunky power suits for something more modern.
That's a great way to put it. And remember, SMRs aren't just about looking good. They have some serious safety upgrades. Unlike traditional plants, which rely on external power and can be vulnerable during blackouts, many SMRs have these passive safety features that use natural forces like gravity to keep the reactor cool, even in emergencies.
So kind of like how a thermos keeps your coffee hot without needing to be plugged in.
Exactly. It's simple and doesn't rely on complicated systems that can fail.
That's pretty reassuring.
It is, but even with all these improvements, SMRs haven't exactly taken off yet. There are still some big obstacles in their way.
Like what?
Well, first you've got the regulatory hurdles. Even though SMRs are smaller and supposedly simpler, they still need to go through this intense approval process with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the NRC.
And the NRC isn't known for being quick or easy to deal with.
Well, exactly.
It's like trying to get permission to build a treehouse in a city park. You got to jump through hoops, fill out mountains of paperwork, and wait forever for approval.
Perfect analogy. And then there's the money problem. Building these SMRs requires a ton of upfront investment. And investors are always cautious about nuclear projects. They've seen the cost overruns, delays, and public pushback. They're not exactly lining up to throw money at another potential disaster.
So NuScale isn't the only one dealing with these issues. It's a problem for the whole SMR industry.
That's right. But here's where things get interesting. Despite those obstacles, there's a growing buzz around SMRs, both in the US and globally. Governments are starting to see their potential, and investment is coming in from both public and private sources.
I know the U.S. Department of Energy has been a big supporter of NuScale, right?
They have. The DOE provided a lot of funding for NuScale's early work, and they're still investing in research and development for SMRs in general. They clearly see this tech as important for a clean energy future.
It's almost like there's a race to develop SMRs now, with countries all competing for a piece of this potential market. Who are some of the other players we should be watching?
Well, there are a few interesting ones. In the U.S., you have Westinghouse, a big name in nuclear energy, and TerraPower, which is backed by Bill Gates. They're both working on their own SMR designs.
Oh yeah, I've heard of TerraPower. Aren't they developing that traveling wave reactor? That sounds super futuristic.
It is. The traveling wave reactor is completely different from NuScale's modular design. It promises to be even more efficient and create less waste. It could even solve some of those long-standing problems with nuclear waste disposal. It's definitely something to watch.
And what about Canada? They've always been leaders in the nuclear field.
Absolutely. Canada has tons of nuclear experience, and they see SMRs as a key part of their plan to cut carbon emissions and provide clean energy to remote communities. They're working on several SMR designs, including some specifically for things like mining and oil production.
So there are a lot of different companies and technologies vying for attention and money. Do you think NuScale can keep up with these big players?
That's the big question. NuScale does have a few things going for them. They've been focused on SMRs for a while, and they've hit some important milestones, like getting that NRC design certification. And their modular approach gives them flexibility and scalability, which could be a big draw for certain customers.
True, but they've also got that baggage from the CFPP mess and the SEC inquiry. Will that hurt their reputation and make it harder to compete?
It could. It really depends on whether they can regain the trust of investors and prove they can deliver on their promises. Cost effectiveness, safety, and finishing projects on time. They need a win, and they need it soon.
So what would success look like for NuScale? Is it just about surviving financially, or is there something bigger at stake? Let's explore that in part 3, where we'll look at the bigger implications of NuScale's journey and think about the future of this game-changing technology. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been digging into this 10Q filing from NuScale Power Corporation. And wow, it's been quite a ride. It's a story about big dreams, big risks, and a company trying to stay afloat in a rapidly changing energy world.
Yeah, it's a classic innovation story full of high hopes and huge challenges, and of course, a lot of uncertainty. But what makes it so fascinating is that it's not just about one company. It's about the future of energy, the fight against climate change, and the role nuclear power might play in all of it.
Absolutely. We've seen NuScale face some serious setbacks, that contract termination, the SEC investigation, but they've also hit some impressive milestones. They got that NRC design certification, they're forming new partnerships. So what's the verdict? Is NuScale a rising star in the clean energy world, or are they headed for disaster?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's like watching a high-stakes poker game. They've got some good cards, but they're also facing tough competition. And they're in wild cards that could change everything.
Okay, so let's break it down for our listeners. What are the things that will determine whether NuScale sinks or swims?
In my opinion, it comes down to a few key things. First, they need to win back the trust of investors. That CFPP situation hurt their reputation. They need to prove that they can actually deliver what they promise. Cost effectiveness, finishing projects on time. Actions speak louder than words.
You're right, they can't just talk the talk. They need to show that they can get things done.
Exactly. Second, they have to handle the regulatory hurdles. We know the NRC is slow and thorough. NuScale can't afford to get stuck in bureaucratic delays. They need to be flexible, adaptable, and proactive in getting those permits and approvals.
It's like they're running a marathon with an obstacle course every mile.
Exactly. And then there's public perception. Nuclear power still has a lot of negative associations. NuScale needs to convince people that SMRs are safe and a viable alternative. They have to be transparent about the risks, talk to communities, and educate people about the benefits.
So they need to almost rebrand nuclear energy, make it more appealing to a generation that's grown up afraid of meltdowns.
Exactly. It's a tough job, but it's crucial. Now, on the positive side, NuScale does have some advantages. Their modular design is a big plus. It offers flexibility, they can scale up easily, and it could mean lower construction costs.
And don't forget that NRC design certification, that's a huge accomplishment. It shows their SMR design is solid.
Absolutely. That certification puts them ahead of a lot of competitors. And then there's this growing global demand for clean energy. Countries all over are trying to cut carbon emissions. Nuclear power is starting to look more attractive.
Right, it's becoming clear we can't keep relying on fossil fuels. We need a reliable energy source that doesn't produce carbon. One that works even when the sun's not shining and the wind's not blowing.
Exactly, and that's where SMRs like NuScale's could really make a difference. They offer a real alternative to traditional nuclear power and could be a key part of solving the world's energy problems.
So what does all this mean for our listener? What are the big takeaways from this deep dive into NuScale and SMRs?
Well, I think it shows us that innovation isn't a smooth process. It's messy, unpredictable, full of surprises. NuScale's story is a perfect example. They've hit roadblocks, but they've also been resilient and creative.
It shows the human desire to keep pushing forward, even when things are uncertain.
Absolutely. I also think this story makes us think about the future of energy and what role nuclear power will play. SMRs offer a glimpse into a world where nuclear energy is safer, more efficient, and easier to access.
But it's a story that's still being written. We don't know yet if NuScale will make it, or if SMRs will live up to all the hype.
That's what makes it so exciting. The stakes are high, the people involved are ambitious, and the ending is a mystery. It's like a real-life drama unfolding right in front of us.
Well said. As we wrap up this deep dive, we're left with a question. Will NuScale Power Corporation be a warning about aiming too high? Or will they become the symbol of a new age of nuclear energy? only time will tell. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive on